Hi there, I'm Shweta. Welcome to my channel. In this video, I'm going to show you how you don't need to scroll through pages and pages of magazines and books to find the ideal image for reference while you're painting. Well, if you did stumble upon something that you really love, you can use the same image to paint multiple paintings, tweaking in certain elements, and the results are going to be quite surprising. So this video is for someone who wants to learn how to paint something like this from something like this, make the adjustments, make the edits, and create a more stunning, more visually pleasing painting from just one image. So let's begin the video, and I'm sure you're going to find some valuable information, show you step by step how I actually paint landscapes. It's going to really change and make it much easier when you approach a landscape painting in watercolors. So without further ado, let's begin. So let's begin with analyzing what I'm trying to do in this video. I have found this image on one of my workbooks, and I was delighted to see the way the sky, the mountains, the meadows all were integrated into this beautiful, in fact really gorgeous painting. I painted this in a haste, and this painting that I worked on was a little narrow. So I decided to paint this one more time using a wider sheet of watercolor paper, and wanted to see how the results would actually turn out. So rather than having the water and the meadow or the landforms cramped in that 4x6 size paper, I used a 5x7 and began painting this. I initially was a little skeptical as to how this would turn out, and wanted to see how reducing the amount of details would do for this painting. The first painting that I was showing you had way too many details, and it has its own beauty, but in the second one I wanted to cut all that noise out and make it as simple as possible. So as you can see here, I am roughly marking the sky, the mountains, and the exact position where I would like the water to be. I'm not really going crazy with the sketching, because as I lay the paints down, it will also give me a visual guide as to where I'm going to paint the next elements that are going to follow. I'm using the phthalo blue green shade, which is one of my most favorite colors for the skies. I've tried numerous colors, but I think this really nails it. So beginning with the water on the paper, I'm always a fan of using the wet on wet technique for painting the skies. I'm beginning with the phthalo blue and laying it across the area marked for the sky. The sky isn't really the focal point in this painting. As you can see, I am focusing more on the water and the daisies in the foreground. So I'm going to paint the skies, and then also make sure that I have enough of white spaces to indicate the distant mountains. The way I like to approach the painting for landscape in particular is to go from very light to dark. And in this, I have a strategy. The strategy is to look at a painting that you're inspired to paint and really bring down the values to the lowest possible that you can think of, and create those washes on the paper, as you can see on the reference image. So I have laid down the blue, left the whites as is, because that's the white of the paper. And if I see a yellow, I'm just going to put the yellow. Believe me, this works the best way, because landscape paintings can really drain you out if you're thinking about values and thinking about shadows, darker tones, lighter tones. So this is the way that has worked out really easily for me with pretty good results. So all I'm doing is, if I see a blue, I'm going to put the lightest value of blue. If I see a yellow, I'm going to put the lightest value of yellow. If I see a green, I'm going to put the lightest value of green. If I see a red and a brown, likewise. So I'm really not focusing on anything but just the shapes, the loose shapes of the landforms, skies, water, whatever elements that you see, and bring it down to the lightest value. This is the very first step. It's going to really help you plan the next mid values and the darker values. The darker values are really not that difficult. The key, the crux of the entire watercolor painting are the midtones or the middle value, one shape that can sort of really make or mar your entire painting. So at this stage, I am painting only those values, and if you actually find yourself adding in a little more darker values on a scale of say 1 to 7 or 1 to 10, maybe we are trying to do 1, 2, 3 right now, and the mid values would be 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, 9, 10 would be the darker values. So I'm just splitting them into 3 categories, and hope this is going to help you, because this is exactly how I do all my paintings, and they really do turn out attractive. I wouldn't say they are artist grade, but they are attractive, and people do want to buy them because something in the painting that's calling and very visually interesting for them. So once the paints are a little dry, I'm going in and adding the blue for the flow of the water. At this point, you can add cobalt blue, ultramarine blue, or even if you like, you can continue with the phthalo blue green shade. As you can see, I'm laying in the blues for the water and the ripples in the water, the textures in the water. I am leaving the white spaces, adding in different tones of the blue to indicate the water that's flowing. Keeping this really simple, all the strokes are diagonal, bottom to top, and anyone can do this. Just keeping in mind that we are creating some movement. and the movement has to be interesting. So that's why I've been switching between different blues. And the water is going to be darker where the sun is on the opposite side. And also, whenever it's taking a little bit of a turn, as it hits the landforms or the rocks, and it's going to be a little more darker than the water that's flowing in the center. I'm also now going in and putting in those curves for the rocks, the grass, the pathway. And remember that the picture is just a reference. We are not trying to absolutely paint a replica of it, but we are inspired by it, and you're definitely going to do a great job. But the renditions each time are going to be different. Every painting, even if I'm using the same reference, if I'm painting it 100 times, 1,000 times, each of those paintings are going to be different. And that's the beauty of watercolor, because there is no set formula by which I'm painting. It's not about paint by number, or if it's not even an acrylic or an oil painting to get the exact results. So enjoy that creative liberty that you have. Enjoy it that from one reference you can create several paintings, and each time it's going to be different. So I'm adding some grasses here, as you can see. If you like, you can add longer ones, you can use darker ones, but the main point over here is you would have realized that the values of my paints have changed from the first step where we did really light values, almost like the consistency of tea, just staining a plain sheet of water. So I'm stroking them, but it's important to note that the layer before this was dry, or else everything would have mingled and merged and created um, not a very interesting separation between the grasses and the land. Now it's time to add the hard lines or the outlines defining the mountains. So the paints that have dried, and I'm taking my fine tip brush and very free-handedly inking those areas, painting those areas where I want to show the mountains. And remember, we are going light to dark, we are going background, foreground, midground, and sometimes switching up the order because we want the paints to dry. I want the mountains also to have some depth. So some areas will be lit by the sunlight quite heavily, that the snow is going to be nice and sparkly. We can also use a little bit of white paint at the end of it to highlight the mountains. But for now, I am concentrating on the strokes to indicate the steep altitude of the mountains. Now comes the challenging part, adding the trees in the midground. I found that using a natural brush, which doesn't have much of a spine to it, doesn't have a spring to it, works better for painting um, large trees with bold foliage because the brush is able to hold much more water than a regular a non-natural brush, a synthetic brush, and works wonderful, keeping in those whites as is and making the strokes as natural as possible. And again, I would be bringing in some lighter colors for the trees to indicate the natural light falling on them, and the ones behind are going to be dark. Now I'm coming back to the foreground because I allowing the mid ground paints to dry, and using the white gouache or just a really bright white watercolor, painting the flowers. This time my flowers are going to be not totally the elements that are going to be highlighting the entire painting. They're part of it, and using the tinier brush to make the petals. I could go on painting this with many more strokes and adding more elements and details, but the whole point of painting this again was to actually reduce the amount of details as compared to the first painting. Well, they're more beautiful uh, they're beautiful in their own ways, but as you can see, one has more details and the other one is more clear. It's a clean painting with not too much of competition between the elements. So the first is the reference which inspired me to paint. One was done with a limited time, more details, and the second one was slow and worked in lesser details. So I hope you find this video inspiring and take tips that little is more watercolors. We just want to get the entire painting with minimal strokes and colors and have the depth and the beauty that really emanates from simplicity. I love this as well. It's just personal choices, but you can play around with the same image, and several renditions are going to come from that one reference image. So thank you for watching. I really appreciate your comments and feedback, and subscribe if you liked what you have watched. Thank you again.